so they wasn't in a foreign land. But Naomi there at the end of our lesson last week, she was giving her blessings to her two daughter-in-laws, Ruth and Orpah, to stay there in Moab, because it would have been a lot easier for them being widows, that they would find another husband or whatever, someone to take care of them in their own country, instead of journeying back with her to Judah. And so, because Naomi had got word that the famine, however, was over, and there was food there once again in her homeland, and being in a foreign country without her immediate family there, she really felt even more uncomfortable, I would say. And so she wanted to go back to her home country, where at least she did have some relatives there. However, Ruth, we know, insisted on going with her back to Judah. Ruth wanted to go back with Naomi. She didn't want to stay behind. She felt that she would need to go with her to be a help to Naomi. And she's told her that she would learn of her God, said that your people will be my people and your God will be my God, and she would accept him and be a part of the family there in Judah. And then this week we're going to study that we see kindness, and kindness is really a trait that Christian believers should have. They should have that trait about them. We should have a kindness about us, right? We shouldn't be spiteful and evil and do things to harm others and with words or deeds, but we should show a kindness of us. That should be a trait that we show. And we see that it really should be a mark, really, to us as Christians. And it teaches us how to show kindness to those who are less well off than we are. We all know people that may be less well off than we are. I'm not rich by any means. I don't have an abundance of money. I've got an abundance of junk, stuff that I don't need. But I'm rich in fishing poles, and I've been putting them to use. But I'm not any better than most people, right? I work very hard for what I do have. But we see poverty, right, within our own community as well, and it's around the country and around the world. And it's getting worse by the day, and in our nation as a whole. And some people didn't ask for this type of lifestyle. They didn't want this type of way to live. They just found themselves there. Maybe a meal that they worked at closed down, or a job that they had decided they were going to close the doors, and that left them abruptly without a job, without a way of income. And if people don't have a little bit of a nest egg to kind of fall back on during hard times, then soon, if they don't soon find a place of work to provide for them and their families, and sooner or later they don't have the car they were driving, they'll come get it. They don't have the house that they lived in, they'll be thrown out. And they find themselves out on the street, and they're not able to recover for their needs. And then the others that we see, not passing judgment, but you see them, and you think that that's just the way that they've decided to make their way of life. They don't decide that they want to do any better or try to do something, because we all see the now hiring signs, right, about everywhere we look and go. It may not be necessarily what you want to do, but it's a way to start somewhere. But some people find it easier just to receive a handout and do things of that nature. But whatever the case may be, we are really not to look down on those people, right? We're not to make fun of them. We're not to belittle people who are less fortunate than we are. I mean, there's been times, even though I've had a job all of my working days since I was 16, working a public job, and before that helping Dad the best I could with his little small business that he was running, roofing and all those things. I didn't care much for it, but I did it. That's hard work. But anyway, I've always worked, but there's been times that I really couldn't afford to go buy groceries sometimes. I'd have to go to the cheapest place I could find to go get something to be able to put some kind of food on the table. Maybe poor people like me drive a Ford because they can't afford a Chevrolet or a Rolls Royce or something. We have to buy the lesser brand of vehicles. You know, I had to settle for a lower end truck. I couldn't get the Lariat package. I couldn't afford all that. So I got just about the baseline of a Ford pickup. And maybe some of us live in a mobile home because we can't afford the $500,000 brick house up the road. But nonetheless, we're not to look down on people. We don't go around making fun of people or ignoring people, shunning them, or we like to call it being stuck up. We're not to go around doing that just because they don't live maybe in a place that we live or drive a nice vehicle or whatever the case may be. You're kind of getting the point here, I hope. But here we're going to learn of Boaz, which is a relative of Naomi. So Ruth and Naomi was destitute because they were both widows, and even though Naomi had traveled back to her homeland, she was still considered a destitute because she was a widow. She didn't have a man to support her or supply the need to help with her. And so Ruth here is going to ask for permission to go work in the fields and go try to do something to help feed them both. But God's going to lead Ruth to a particular field to work in, not just any field. But it just so happened that Boaz, who happened to see her on his way back from town, and Boaz was very wealthy, and so he's a rich man. He had plenty of money. He had plenty of land, possibly. He had a mansion or whatever the case may be, but he was well off. But he saw Ruth here that was poor. He noticed her, and he is going to take care of her here. He's going to take care of her needs, and he's really going to go out of his way to help her because she is a widow, but she's not of Judah. She's not of Israel. She's a Moabite. She's a foreigner. And so the Levitical law, though, was very strictly in its commands here that God's people would take care of the poor. And we see that a lot of Christian ministries. We have some here in Hickory, some local ones that do help and take care of the poor people. They supply clothes, they supply food, they do different things. We did a free giveaway here. We gave free hot dog lunch, and we gave free boxes of groceries, and we've done certain things like that throughout many years. But we're called to help take care of the poor. But Boaz knew that, and he knew what the law taught, and he knew, and he was very faithfully to follow the law. So we'll begin with verse 8 here in chapter 2. Then said Boaz unto Ruth, Hearest thou not, my daughter? Go not to glean in another field, neither go from hence, but abide here fast by my maidens. Let thine eyes be on the field that they do reap, and go there after them. Have I not charged the young men that they shall not touch thee? And when thou art athirst, go into the vessels and drink of that which the young men have drawn. And so when Ruth went out into the fields here to glean, which just means to pick up the grain that was left behind by the harvesters, and they were instructed to leave the four corners, and those four corners were for the poor people, and they were for sojourners, and they were even instructed not to pick the fields clean, to leave something there behind for the poor and for the less fortunate that would be passing by. And so Boaz quickly spotted Ruth here. He spotted her working in his field. Now, I don't know, maybe she had pretty hair or something. I don't know what got him to where he singled her out, but he did. But we can say that really the Spirit of God made him focus to her but he recognized her very quickly and spotted her. And so he saw something that was special about this woman, and he took a liking to her, and he wanted to help her. And so he told her to stay in his field and not go to the other fields. And he told her to stay there with the women who worked for him already and work with him. And then he also gave instructions there to the young men not to trouble her, not to bother her, not to mess with her, right? Maybe not to flirt with her. We can say that. He didn't want no harm to come to Ruth. He was already becoming her protector, her knight in shining armor, we can say. And so then he told her that the water there provided for his workers was also hers to drink of freely when she was thirsty. And so Ruth was in a new land, and she didn't know anyone. The only one she knew was Naomi. She knew no one there. She didn't know the neighbors next door, and she certainly didn't realize whose field she was working in. She didn't know Boaz was a real wealthy man or any of that, and she had no husband. She had no friends. She had no clear way to make a living, and she didn't have really any certainty of a future. She didn't know what her future held for her, being so destitute, but she was willing to not just lay around and wait for somebody to do it for her. She was willing to go out and try to do something, try to help and try to better the life for her and her mother-in-law that she faithfully followed back to this foreign land. And so all Ruth had was Naomi, but she also had Naomi's God. And so God was directing Ruth's steps, and she didn't realize it. But Naomi returned to Bethlehem, the area here of her relative, Boaz, and it was in this region that Ruth had sought out this work. And she was wanting to get food for her and Naomi, and she could have been turned away because she was a foreigner. They could have been cruel to her. They could have said things that was not very nice, because she was of a Moabite region. But and she could have very well been harmed. She could have some things could have happened to her that should not happen. But God was protecting her. He was protecting Ruth here because he was directing her steps to this field that Boaz owned. And God knew that Boaz was a faithful servant of his, and that he would obey the law and take care of this foreigner named Ruth. And it was very important also that Boaz arrived at his field at this appointed time, that he arrived when Ruth was there, because God sent Boaz to help Ruth and to show her a kindness that she wasn't really expecting. And she could have been wondering, why in the world is he being so kind to me? Because I'm a Moabite. I'm not even from this land, and we've just only been here maybe a day or two. But she was already getting a kindness that she wasn't expecting. But nothing happens, we know, to the child of God by accident. There's not one thing that will happen to us by accident. And when we need something, we know that God will always open up every one of his resources that he has. And we know that he has a vast supply of resources for us because he loves his children so very much, just like our earthly father, my daddy. He loves his children so much, and he would open up whatever resource he could have to help us in one way or another, where it be the great wisdom and knowledge that he's full of. And really, all of us as children ever need is our daddy's love and our mother's love. Now, that's a great resource that we all three have. We've always had that. Very appreciative of my parents. Verse 10, then she fell on her face and bowed herself to the ground and said unto him, why have I found grace in thine eyes, that thou shouldest take knowledge of me, seeing I am a stranger? And Boaz answered and said unto her, it hath fully been shown me all that thou hast done unto thy mother-in-law since the death of thine husband, and how thou hast left thy father and thy mother and the land of thy nativity, and art come unto a people which thou knewest not heretofore. and the Lord recompense thy work, and a full reward be given thee of the Lord God of Israel, under whose wings thou art come to trust. And so we notice here in these scriptures, these verses this morning, that we, after thanking Boaz, Ruth, it's telling us here that she fell on her face, she bowed down before him, and that's her way of showing gratitude to him for the kindness and that he's showing her. It's a respect thing that I believe Ruth was showing also to Boaz. But then she wanted an explanation for his kindness to her, a stranger. We know a lot of times if somebody calls us randomly, and I had a text yesterday that was a random text from my HR at work, and anytime you got HR calling or texting, you kind of get a little cringy. But we have an excellent HR person where I work. But he just simply texts me, "Happy birthday, sir. Hope you have a good day." And my response was, "Thank you. What do you want?" And that's sometimes the way we feel, right? When somebody randomly calls us or texts us or does that type of thing, we're kind of like, what do you want? You know, what's the next thing that's going to be coming? And so that's kind of the way I believe Ruth felt, because she was being shown all of this kindness. And then she was kind of wondering what maybe else would be coming, or what would she be doing in return for all of his kindness that was being shown, because she was a foreigner, a widow. And then why was she getting this kindness from him, from this very wealthy man? And when I didn't read the first part of the chapter, maybe should have, but he calls Ruth daughter, and that's kind of a sign, a signal to us that there was a little bit of an age gap there between Boaz and Ruth, that Boaz was a little more mature in age. I'm not going to say he was an old man, I just did. But he called her daughter, so there could have been a little bit of age gap there. But also we already know that Ruth's poor and Boaz is very wealthy. So it's kind of another thing to it, that she was receiving all of this. How did she get the attention of his eyes? Because we already know that the Israelites didn't mess with Gentile people. They considered people that wasn't of Jewish descent or from Israel, that they considered those outsiders and unclean people. And then here she was all of that. She wasn't an Israelite. She was a Moabite woman. They worshiped Baal. They worshiped false gods. And they were all considered unclean to the Jewish people. But yet she got the attention from the eyes of Boaz. Maybe Naomi was treated bad while she was in Moab by the Moabites. Maybe she wasn't treated very well. Maybe Amalek and her sons wasn't treated right? Because they were in a foreign land. They were considered trespassers maybe. Maybe it was that she wasn't from there. She expected maybe the same treatment, maybe that she had seen her people treat Amalek. Of course, not Amalek, but Naomi and her two sons, because Amalek was already dead before they were married to Ruth and Orpah. But maybe she's seen some of that. And then maybe she just heard it all in general by living there, and people coming from other places. We hear that even in our own country, of people coming from different countries. They get called a lot of slang, different things, right? But so maybe she heard some of that, and she expected the same. Maybe she even really expected to be rejected from the local people there, especially someone that owns the property of which she's on and has all of this wealth. But here Boaz is being very kind and helping her. So she was showing him gratitude for his kindness of helping her. And Boaz tells her that he had been showed all of the things that Ruth had done for Naomi since the death of her husband. The kindness that she had shown Naomi, and taking care of her and staying by her side, and even coming with her to a foreign land, coming with her to Bethlehem with her instead of staying there in Moab. And so she had left her home place of her father and of her mother. That's what he's talking about there, of her nativity, from where she was born. And she came to a land where she didn't know the people or didn't even know really their customs, just what she had learned from her mother-in-law, Naomi. But Boaz commended her for her courage. It took a lot of courage for Ruth to do that, to come to the foreign land of Judah and to live in that foreign land and to help her mother-in-law. And so then when we see Boaz's quick response here to Ruth by pointing her back to the God of Israel, and he's praying over her, right? He's saying a prayer to the Lord to recompense her work and to give her a full reward given to her from the Lord God of Israel. So he's pointing her to the source, to the God, to the true God, who she had come to trust in. Ruth had just come to trust into the God of Israel. And we too are to use every opportunity that we can to point others to our God, to the God of Israel, especially when God is using us to help others in a very time of need. Boaz expressed his desire here that God would reward Ruth for all that she had done. And then where Boaz was likening God here to a bird, talking about under his wings, is that God keeps his children safe from harm and keeps them warm. Same with our earthly Father. He keeps us safe and he keeps us warm. If it took lighting the kerosene heater back in the day, we stayed warm. And I know Dad talks about when his dad would go and put the coal in the furnace to get the house warm. But it's just the same as God. He takes his children up under his wing to keep them safe. Psalms 36 verse 7, how excellent is thy loving kindness, O God. And therefore the children of men put their trust under the shadow of thy wings. And we know that nothing can harm a child of God without God's specific permission. And we see that there in the book of Job. Satan couldn't touch him. He couldn't do anything to Job unless God allowed it, because God had his hedge of protection. He has a hedge of protection around us. And so Boaz was saying that Ruth would be safe here. He was telling her that she would be provided for under God's care, and that God's care is better than any care we could ever get in this life. It's better than any care we can get from a hospital or a doctor's office or insurance companies or whatever. God's care is the absolute best. Verse 13, then she said, let me find favor in thy sight, my Lord, for that thou hast confronted me, and for that thou hast spoken friendly unto thine handmaid, thou I be not like unto one of thine handmaidens. And Boaz said unto her, at mealtime, come thou hither and eat of the bread, and dip thy morsel in the vinegar. And she ate beside the reapers, and he reached her parched corn, and she did eat, and was sufficed, and left. And so the Lord has a close relationship, right, with those of us who join within his community that comes within the family of God. And Ruth had never really experienced this type of favor before, this type of closeness, especially with the false gods there of Moab. And so this was really a unique relationship that she was experiencing with God that she had never had before. And this is why, because she was now believing in the true God and the one God of the universe. And Ruth continued here to thank Boaz. She continued to thank him for what he had done, for his unusual kindness. And then when it was time for lunch here, he invited her to come and share in the food and in the drink and to eat with all those who had worked in his fields. And so Boaz's kindness here to Ruth can be seen really as a picture of God's love for each and every one of us this morning. He goes to really great lengths to bring us into his community and family. And so Boaz had a large heart he was personal with his people who worked for them, and showed that he cared for them. He sat down with them. He didn't sit somewhere off from the people, but he sat down and he ate with them, something that some higher ups today don't do a lot of. They don't do that. And I know just in a couple weeks I'll be going to camp meeting there in Cleveland. And there are people from all over the world that'll be there, all over the United States, different parts. They'll come there, and myself and all the people there that's serving within the services, that's singing or whatever, preaching. We sat down with everybody at meal times. We're all down there in one place. And we talk to the missionaries. We talk to all the folk that are there. And it's the only maybe one time a year that I really feel like a celebrity, because they all want their picture taken with you. And they treat you just like you're some kind of movie star, I guess is what I could say. But it's very humbling, though, really. And I really enjoy it and appreciate all of that. But they show each and every one of us such appreciation. And for showing them really the hospitality that they're shown, and the kindness that they're shown. And they are important. They are important. Everyone that's there is important. But we go through a lot of great lengths to make them feel that way, to make them feel important. And I know that Brother Hall, when he was there, he would sit down and eat with them. He would sit down and mingle with them. And Don and Polly and all the ministers there. And you would think that we were so important to them by the way that they treated us back. But it's great to see. But you see what I'm getting at, right? That's the way we're supposed to show. Boaz is showing us a great lesson here to how to treat people, even if they work for you, how to make them feel like they're so important. And they are. They were important. But these people are from poor countries, and they don't have a lot, some of the folk that come. And they'll even make clothes. I used to have a set. I couldn't wear them. But I've had some sets that they brought a set of clothes from the Gambia, I believe it was. And a little snug. But it was purple. But it's the things that they make, it's very, very beautiful in color. But Boaz showed his people the same thing here. He sat down with them and he ate with them. And then he's showing the same respect that he had for his own workers also to Ruth. Because she was just as important to Boaz here as the ones that had been with him maybe 20 years. But she was able to eat as much as she wanted. She could eat whatever was there until she was full, till she was satisfied. And so it was coming clear to her, really, and those that were around, you've got everybody watching, see what's going on, that Boaz had become her protector, and he had already was starting to become a provider for Ruth. And so Boaz isn't aware of just how far God, though, was really going to take this newfound relationship of him being her protector and provider. Verse 15, and when she was risen up to glean, Boaz commanded his young men, saying, let her glean even among the sheaves, and reproach her not. And let fall also some of the handfuls of purpose for her, and leave them, that she may glean them, and rebuke her not. So she gleaned in the field until even and beat out that she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. And she took it up and went into the city, and her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned, and she brought forth and gave to her that she had reserved after she was sufficed. And so Ruth went back to work in the field after they had had their meal, and Boaz had told his young men to deliberately really drop some of the stalks of grain, because that way what was dropped, the ones coming behind would pick it up and take it home, so that she would have plenty to pick up and take home. And so they were also to let her work beside them without disruption. Don't bother her, don't harass her. And so when Ruth got home, she showed Naomi this large amount of grain that she had gleaned, that she had picked up from the harvest. And she also shared how Boaz had been so kind to her, and as if they were maybe having some type of small talk among themselves about maybe a boy that she had met at school, would be our way of looking at this. But she was telling of all the kindness that she was shown. And so these events so far in Ruth's life had been rough up until this point. She had made a very rough and tough decision, but a correct choice here to follow her mother-in-law to Bethlehem and become a part of Naomi's people. And then here we see how God divinely planted Boaz in her path. to take care of all of her needs. And so when God sees us making a right choice for Him, He will take care of every need that we have, right? And sometimes He uses the most extraordinary people to do so. And then we see here that clearly that God demonstrated His love and provincial care for Ruth as she trusted Him, making her a part of the community of God's people. So we can expect our Almighty God to do the same for each and every one of us when we honor Him by standing up on the side of all that is right. And then the near-term result of all of this and her reward for the time being was a huge amount of barley that she was able to harvest and pick up. It was roughly 2/3 of a bushel in today's terms there. But she and her mother-in-law would not need to be concerned about what they would live on or what they would have provided for them, because Ruth had been led by the grace of God to the place where He would bless them. He would take care of them. And so God turned Ruth's heartbreak. She had certainly had plenty of heartbreak. She's certainly been through some trials and certainly in a lot of uncertainties into really a magnificent account here in Israel's history because He showed His loving care towards someone that had no claim to the deity. It had no claim of being one of God's people because she was a Moabite. She wasn't an Israelite. But later we all know that God would extend this love. He would extend this gracious offer of salvation to all of the Gentiles. And He did that through His Son, Jesus Christ. And so Ruth's trust in God, it really resulted in a lot of great blessings for her. And God provided her with a good husband. He provided her with Boaz eventually as her husband and children. She was, before all of this, she was just a poor Moabite woman. But she found herself included into the greatest lineage of Israel, because as her descendants included that of King David, and then later on the ancestor of Jesus Christ. So God rewarded Ruth's decision there to follow Him, and then she entered into a personal relationship with a personal God. We know that God is very personal with us, and He likes for us to have this personal relationship with Him. And He provided for her through Boaz. He uses people to provide for us and take care of us, and He made her a part of this great family. But He also rewards faith and faithfulness. We always like to say, be faithful over a few things, He'll make you ruler over many. All right? But was it worth it for Ruth? Do we think it was worth it for her? Is it worth it for us? Certainly it is. It's worth it for us to join the community and be faithful on the side of God of Israel. Absolutely, it was her experiences here that shows it to us that it's well worth taking the chance. It's well worth the God of the universe. She found the true God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. She discovered a God who was a close relationship with His people. He don't stand off from us. He keeps a close personal relationship with us. And she became part of the community. And we see that God sent Boaz to help her in her time of need. And so He'll send someone to help us in our time of need. But nothing we do in the name of our God will go unnoticed. Not a thing that we do for Him never goes unnoticed. And our God watches us. And in His own time, He's certainly going to provide us with an ample reward. He's going to provide us with those things that we need, whether it be strength, healing, whatever the case may be. He's going to provide for us because we're faithful to Him. We have faith in Him. And so I trust you got something this morning. Mom, you dismiss us.